So I recommend, what did I do? I recommend it. Yeah, but that's really up to you. So now we can go over some of my notes. I went through this weird thing last year where I tried what? Okay, hi everyone. So that was a little weird. I guess it didn't go live when I thought it did. So we're just gonna restart. What's up? My name's Skylar. I am a sophomore from New Jersey. How's it going? You can just leave your answers in the comments. You don't even have to if you don't want to. I have some polls for you, just to get like a good basis of where we are. We have, how confident are you in your notes, and how is school going if you've started? I started on Tuesday. One of my friends started today. I know a lot of people are starting in August, which is crazy to me. Anyway, we're going to be talking about notes today. So before we start, I want you all to follow Think Fiveable on YouTube, on not Facebook. We don't like Facebook. On YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, just so you can really stay up to date with all the news, what's going on, when streams are. Really fun times. Okay, and we have some upcoming streams. It would be great for you guys to see them. We have today at 10 o'clock at night, we have Content and Processes with James Zucker. And tomorrow there's a student study group. So if you guys have any questions about what's going on in class, if you want some review time, you're having problems with homework, you want some help, anything you really need, we can help you with. So that's going to be hosted by me and my pal Varun at 6 p.m. On the 7th, there's going to be a stream on annotating primary sources, and that's going to be with Caroline Castellanos. And then on the 8th of September, we are having analyzing claims and sources with Evan Little. So without further ado, let's start actually there is further ado. Remember to follow me on Instagram if you guys need some help with questions, if you have, want to review something, if your teacher didn't explain something super in depth that you're interested in, I can help you out with that. If you have questions after the stream, check it out. Okay, and then now we're going to talk about sort of what's going on today. So we're going to start off with what do I take notes on? And then we're going to go over note-taking structures and methods of note-taking. In addition, I'll mention some of the tips and tricks that I have for you guys. And then we'll end with the Q&A. So if you guys have questions from class, if you guys want some more help with figuring out different note-taking methods, anything really, I am here for you. Okay, so on the first day of school last year, in my history class, this one kid had raised his hand, is like, well, what do I take notes on? And the teacher just laughed and said, you tell me what we take notes on. So here's my question for you guys. What do you think we should take notes on? I'll give you like 15 seconds to answer. Okay, so that's okay. We can mention what do we take notes on. So number one, cause and effect. Cause and effect is really important because it sort of helps you connect different events in history. For example, if we think about World War I, there were 4 main causes, and that can be sort of summed up by the acronym MAIN. So you have militarism, you have alliances, you have imperialism, and then you have nationalism. So these 4 things, they acted as a cause, and the effect was World War I. Another thing to take note of is change in continuity. And now this is super important because it's on one of your essays. Every year there's the LEQ, and one of the LEQ questions, the long essay, sorry, I should say, one of the questions is of continuity and change in a certain time period. For example, if we're looking at a social example of continuity and change, you could be talking about, well, I'm doing an example from period 0 here. You could be talking about the change in continuity before and after the Neolithic Revolution. So you could have change in that there was more agrarian societies, you were sedentary. A continuity could be like, well, people still herded animals. There was still pastoralism out there. And then an example of a political continuity, you may have the persistence of capitalism in the United States. And then economic change and continuity, same as the other two, we get it. And then another thing to take note of is larger ideas. So what do I mean by a larger idea? If you look in your textbook or prep book or anything really, a lot of times they'll have like bold words or italicized themes, anything like that really. These are something to take note of. Your book deems them important enough for you to see, so they want you to take note of that. So for example, you could have, in a social theme, you could have social stratification. So this is really helpful because it'll tell you, okay, this is what's important for you to know, so you should write this in your notes. So you would write, okay, social stratification, division of labor or something along those lines. You could have a larger political idea. So you could have absolute monarchy. Maybe you're talking about the Glorious Revolution. Then you could take that in your notes. Or there's the larger idea of an economic movement. So you might have capitalism or communism. These are both great ideas that, not necessarily great. These are both larger ideas that you should put in your essay and in your notes. And then lastly, we have historical themes. So the historical themes have changed a little bit from last year. So I'm going to be honest, I'm not completely aware of all of them right now. However, I put a picture in there for your assistance and mine. So the theme number 1 is humans and the environment. Now all of these themes really are key because these are what your tests are based around. But number 1 is just humans and the environment. And this basically covers, how groups have changed the environment, how the environment has affected humanity's, how they've affected humanity's path, really. So for example, you might see in your notes, oh, the Three Gorges Dam. And you would recognize that is a prime example of this environmental theme because it changed the surroundings a lot. Or maybe you have how land affected humans. So you could say, oh, well, Columbus landed in the Indies. And that would be an example of how land and geography had affected humans. You could also have the theme of cultural developments and interactions. Now, if you're reading your textbook, you're flipping through and all of a sudden you see, oh, Indian Ocean trade, that's a prime example. So you would take notes on something like that. Just as a little disclaimer, if you see trade, there's a 100% chance that will show up on your test. Trade's a very common theme in these essays, in these questions, important to take note of. And then the third theme is governance. So this sort of covers, well, who should govern, why should they govern? And you should really take notes on this because government is a major part of not just AP World, but of our lives every day. So it's helpful to just know about that. So putting it in your notes is essential. For example, you could have something that fits in the theme of governance could be like enlightened despots in the Enlightenment. And basically those were people who they acted like enlightened, like as if they were enlightened, but they weren't actually practicing it. So you have like Catherine the Great is a great example. And then you have economic systems. So an example of an economic system could be capitalism or communism. So if you see these in your notes, you should really put them in. And then no, there's more. You have social interactions and organization. So if you see these themes to describe them, I would really say wait, did I already do that? Oh, no. Okay. Social interactions. Another great example of this is trade. Any trade that you see in your notes, you can mark that down. Social interactions. And then last, they have technology and innovation, which is a new theme this year, I believe. So if you see anything in your notes like, oh, well, this applies to technology. So it could be the Industrial Revolution. You want to make a mention of that. So that's basically what you should take notes on. But keep one thing in mind. Different people can remember different things. So maybe you're really good at remembering economic discussions, but you can't remember social as well. You may want to take more notes on the social aspects of stuff than economic or anything like that. Or your teacher could have assigned you a specific thing to take notes on. So just keep that in mind when you're writing them. Okay, I have a little bit of practice here. And it's on the Encomienda system. So I wrote up a little paragraph that you could see in one of your textbooks maybe. So just read through it and then try and figure out what are some key points that I would take notes on in this. And you can leave your answers in the comments. I'll give you 40 seconds to read through it. Okay, and if you haven't already sort of come up with your ideas, just leave them in the chat. You know, tell us what you think. Okay, I'm not seeing much activity, but that's okay. So we can go through this ourselves. So some things I would like to take note on: cause and effect. And the last paragraph is a prime example of this. Because the Encomienda system was very harsh, people decided, well, we don't think that the natives should be doing this. So the cause was hard labor. The effect was importing slaves from Africa. So that's a very important cause and effect because it basically caused the Atlantic slave trade. Oh, we've got a new person. Why, welcome, Judy. Okay, anyway, so we were just talking about the Encomienda system and how we can just sort of take notes on what we see here. Another thing that we could take notes on here is like vocab words. So we can see that there's viceroy, I'm not sure how you say it. So that would be an important thing to mark down in your notes. You could write like viceroy, and you could say they established the Encomienda system. You really want to define these words. If we go back a slide, we can see these historical themes. And we can see that we have a prime example of economic systems. So that's something that we should keep in mind, because the Encomienda system, it really, at its heart, it's an economic system. That's the goal, is to get as much money for the European settlers as possible. So here's the last, my question for you. What are some note-taking forms that you're already familiar with? And you can just leave your answers in the comments. Okay. What is your favorite type of note? Just text, just type it in. Why, hello there, Eric Beckman. And what type of note-taking method is your least favorite? I personally had to take a class on note-taking in middle school. So I'm familiar with more types of notes than I need to be. And I really like mind map notes. My least favorite, though, I have a bit of a hot take here. It's Cornell Notes. I'm sorry, I don't really like Cornell Notes, but that's okay because, you know, everyone has different things that they like. Everyone has different needs. Okay, so now we're going to discuss four methods of note taking that I found are very helpful for not just me, but for a lot of people. And these are Cornell, Flowchart, Mind Map, and just a regular outline. But remember, your teacher may have specific requirements for notes. So if your teacher says, oh, you can only do 3 pages of this, one thing that I would advise is not to do one of the more spatially placed note methods. So you may have mind map. That's not a great choice for that. You may have an outline. No, outline's fine. You may have a flowchart. That's not great for that because it takes up a lot of space. Or maybe you just don't like the note method. So we're going to start off with Cornell Notes. Now, Cornell Notes have a very easy to remember format. It's really just on one side you have your notes. On the other side you have, you know, questions you have about it, comments. You might reiterate what the really important points are. Usually you'll have a summary somewhere. So at the bottom, the top, anywhere really. And these are helpful because you can really tell what you have trouble with and what you have questions about. For example, if I were writing notes on the Meiji Restoration, I might want to point out the importance of Japanese isolationist policies in the past. So I could put that in my questions category or my questions/main points category to really hit that home. So these, you know, they're very organized. You can clearly see what your central ideas are. But the problem is, well, my problem is I'm not very good at reading them. So that's fun. Next up, we have flowchart notes. So flowchart notes, I think they're very cool looking. You usually have like a shape that you start off with, and then you'll have arrows coming off of it, leading in all these different directions, and they contribute to other areas. So you may have, if we go back to our World War I example from before, you could have World War I, and then you have all these arrows pointing off of it, militarism, you've got alliances, imperialism, nationalism, and then you can easily see cause and effect that way. You can also sort of see the sequence of events easier, if that makes sense. They're easy to visualize. So if you're a visual learner, I would recommend this so much. It's very helpful. But I feel like they take a while to write. Like one of my friends uses these and she says well, I've seen her, it takes like 20 minutes for her to get through a page of notes. But once you can really master it, it's pretty quick. And then we have mind map notes. I really like these. I think it looks neat. It's an easy to understand sort of method of studying. And it's really similar to flowchart in that you have like the central idea, and then you have all these sort of branches coming off of it. I would say the problem with mind map notes is that you can't really, you're not very good at writing down definitions. So if you're someone that really needs to know what the definitions of a word are, if you want to know all the elements that contribute to it, mind map's not necessarily the best option for you to take. And now we are going on to just a simple outline. So the simple outline is a pretty common technique. I feel like most of us have seen it at some point in our lives. These are actually a screenshot of my notes from last year. I took notes on the Byzantines. So usually what happens with these simple notes are that you have a big idea, and then you'll indent and have another idea, but oh, this idea might have some more components. So you could do an indent again. So if we look at this example, we have the Byzantines, and then that's the big idea. And then if we indent, we can see that it says government and economy. Indent again, we have centralized, you have attacked often. Well, how do they combat this? I hit indent again and wrote, well, oh, they have the theme system. So that sort of shows how each of them are related. All good now? Do you have any questions? Okay, all good. Okay, so I thought it would be sort of a fun little thing to see how my notes have evolved over time, because independent studying sort of meant that I had to figure out all these things on my own, which was real good. But it also meant that my notes evolved a lot over time. So when I started off the year, it was really just the simple outline. It was straightforward notes. Here we can see some stuff that I talked about, the Neolithic Revolution. So you can see that I have a big idea, I'll indent, talk more stuff about it. But as the year went on, I guess I thought that I was a visual learner, which I'm not. And I got to this very mind map-esque, but also still sort of a simple outline sort of note. So I'd have like a big idea, and then I would, I'll have all these arrows, these different things that connected each other. I don't know what I was thinking, because I didn't comprehend that at all. So I decided, well, I'm going to change this around. And over time, I started to realize that I should really try and compress the notes more. So you can see that I sort of have lists going on at the bottom. You can see that I still sort of have these arrows, though, until eventually at the end of the year, I got to this 2-column system. So it still sort of incorporates the lists and the arrows that were involved in the previous 2, but it's not as visual. So I could read it more easily. I could understand all the elements really. And it appears that these notes were on, I think, the Industrial Revolution. I can't see it that well. But yeah, so I highly recommend that you guys just really try out all these different ways of writing notes, because the more you test it out, the more you can refine your strategy and see what works best for you. That ensures, you can learn the best, you can gather the most information, and you can become an educated world citizen. Okay, so we're nearing the end of my presentation here. So I've set up a little demo. number one thing I would recommend, number one thing, is that you take notes on your notes. So what do I mean by this? Maybe you take really long notes, or maybe you just want a study guide, but you could take your notes, and instead of treating it like notes, you could treat it like your textbook. So you could sort of take notes on the key points in there, and you really refine your information to what you need the most. So I'm just going to open up a new tab, and I can show you an example of this. I'm going to close that. Okay, is this showing up on screen? Okay, great. So we're going to do a little demo that I set up about Japanese imperialism and the Meiji Restoration. So you probably haven't covered this in your classes yet, but that's okay, because we're going to have a little lesson on it now. So for much of Japanese history, they were very isolationist. They didn't want any European influence, as we can see here. And the result is this isolationist nation. However, the Industrial Revolution meant that Japan was really falling behind everyone else. So they created the Treaty of Kanagawa after Commodore Matthew Perry sort of, I don't want to say invades, but joins in. So eventually they made the Treaty of Kanagawa, and the nationalists sort of revolt. But what does this cause? It causes the Meiji Restoration. And this removed the shogunate, which had been in power for centuries by then. For those of you who don't know, the shogunate was this, it was a military dictatorship, to say it most easily. And basically what happened was they kept the emperor, but the shogun was the figurehead for much of this time. So they removed the shogun, and they gave power to the emperor, to the once placeholder emperor, Emperor Meiji. And the results were all of this really amazingly fast industrialization. I remember reading it took Japan 40 years, but it had taken centuries for the rest of Europe to do. You have this revived cultural creativity period. You have this military power. And what that caused is that they became imperialists. They were invading other countries. There was debates over Manchuria, Taiwan, parts of Korea. But here's the thing. Maybe I want a study guide on this. So what can I do? I can take notes on my notes. I'm just going to make the display a little smaller so we can see everything. So I'm going to start off with my title, Japanese Imperialism. And it's okay if you spell things wrong, because it's fine. So we see that this first little section here is really long and kind of unnecessary. So I'm going to slim it down a bit. And we're going to write isolationist, industrialized West equals, industrialized West means that they are Japanese are behind. So here you can see that we've really condensed this large chunk of text into one line. And then if we keep going, we can see, okay, we see that Matthew Perry, that seems to be a big name here. So I'm going to write that down and just write that down. Shows that they are behind. Is this making sense so far? Leave your answers in the comments. Oh, we have another person. Welcome, Jane. We're just doing a demonstration on how to make a study guide, basically. So it shows that they are behind. And now we can continue. I'm going to write the Treaty of Kanagawa. So we can see that this is really a big name in this because, I gave it its own line, so we can really ensure that it has space in the study guide. And I'm going to do another arrow here. I just really like arrows, in case you can't tell. And that results in a revolt against government. Anyway, we can start talking about the Meiji Restoration. Sorry. Okay. Sorry about that in the background. we can discuss how, the Meiji Restoration, we really have to have this because it's important. So I'll just copy and paste this from before. Okay, now we can add more points. So some of the results of this, we can write down world power, and industry, cultural, creativity, military. And so really quickly, I took this large portion of notes and made it so much easier to study, to look at, to read. And now I can almost use it as a study guide. So I'd be like, hey, anyone want to quiz me on this? And it makes it a lot easier. So that's like my big thing that I would recommend to you guys. I'm going to go back to the slideshow now. Okay. So that was how you sort of make a study guide or make your notes a little bit shorter if you need to. And another thing I would advise, so this is really helpful for me. I like using graph paper when I write. I have a habit of writing really big. And I know a lot of people who also do. So basically what I would recommend is that if you want to make sure that your notes aren't super long and aren't longer than the book, you might want to try using graph paper because you can really format your notes more easily. Another thing I would recommend, review your notes constantly. Oh my gosh, this is something that's really important. My bus ride in the morning, it's like 50 minutes. So I always decide, well, I need something to do. So I would always review my AP World notes. If you can make a habit out of reviewing your notes, it stays. You have time management. You can really understand it. You can have if you can have a designated AP World time, it makes everything so much easier as the time gets closer to the test. Another thing I would advise is to write down any questions you have. I didn't have a teacher, so what I would do is I would write down my questions and Google them, which wasn't always great. I would not recommend that. So if I ever needed it, I knew more easily what I had to remember instead of waiting for like 2 days before the test and then realize, waking up in a cold sweat and realize, I don't know what the Meiji Restoration is. So if you write it down, it makes it easier to come back to in the future. In addition, I would recommend Quizlets. There are so many great Quizlet sets. If you just search AP World, you'll see Quizlets for every chapter in the book. There's one that's a few thousand terms. That's every key term you need to know for the AP World test, which is it's a helpful thing to do. You could review that on the bus. You could review that when you're at home. You could review that right before bed. Another good source that I would recommend is Freemanpedia. I'm just going to open up that tab. Okay, I'm going to share my tab with you because I really advise using this. Sorry about that. It's loading. Okay, I guess we're not going to. It's this easy and quick review site that's focused on AP World. It's really helpful. There's all these different visuals that are very cool to look at and very helpful to know your material. And next up, find a review book. Oh my gosh, review books save me. I used a review book as my textbook. It was the AMSCO. I was just checking if I had it. I advise, please buy AMSCO. Oh, I'm just going to add the link to Freemanpedia in the chat. Okay, so if you guys are interested in using Freemanpedia, I just put the link in the chat. It's a great website. Highly recommend. So back to the slideshow. Find yourself a review book. I swear by the AMSCO review book. It is so helpful. They have a very, it's a casual, it's more of an informal tone, but it really lays out the information in a great way. They have DBQ questions. They have so much practice with that. They have LEQ. They have full tests that you can practice with. And this is going to sound weird, but it has better quality paper than a lot of the other ones. So if you really want to mark it up, it makes it a lot easier for that. So buy AMSCO. It's great. I love it. I'm going to grab my Princeton Review textbook right now, just for a little bit of help. So this is the Princeton Review AP World History textbook. It's from last year technically, but it still applies. I went through this like a week before the test and just highlighted everything that I thought was helpful. So I would say the major difference between the Princeton Review book and the AMSCO book would be how much information they have. Because the AMSCO book, it acts almost like a supplement to your class. So if you wanted more help with a subject, you should go into the AMSCO book. But if you want a quick and easy review right before the test starts, go for Princeton Review. And the last one I have, unfortunately, I don't have this review book anymore, but it was a really neat way to lay it out. It was called ASAP. So I believe it was made by Princeton Review. And it's all these different maps and visuals and images that sort of contributed to making a full and complete picture of AP World. And it's just really neat. It's really interesting. It's a great way to lay it out. So if you're a visual learner, or if you just want to look at some maps, look at some nice pictures, I would recommend ASAP. Buy it ASAP. And then don't be afraid. You can, if you have any questions, want some more help with notes, just leave your answers, leave your questions. Okay, well, I think that's all for me, guys. Thanks for coming to the stream, and thanks for sitting through all these technical difficulties. I had some problems with my microphone before. I had some issues with hitting play. But, just once again, follow Think Fiveable. Check out our other streams. It's a great time. It's really helpful. You'll probably get a 5 on the AP test. Yeah, thanks for coming, everyone.